We have President Biden on the ground in Israel this morning, arriving just after a horrific, Palestinians would say, attack from Israel. Israel would say it's the Palestinians' fault on a hospital. I'm going to get into all of this that has left a mass of human carnage and devastation in Gaza. I'm going to take you through what both sides are saying, what I think about it. We'll go through all of the details. But first, I wanted to start with what President Biden is saying on the ground, expressing belief in Israel's side of affairs for what happened with this hospital. Let's take a listen.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
This explosion has already upended President Biden's trip, leading to canceled meetings. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, the specifics of what happened at that hospital as best we can know. And let me just say at the forefront here that the Israeli government has a track record of lying. Certainly, Hamas and Islamic Jihad also have a track record of lying. Journalists are not able to get into Gaza to independently verify what's going on the ground. So take all of that into account as you're analyzing what happened here. So first of all, what we do know, a massive blast rocked a hospital, actually a Christian hospital in Gaza City. It was packed with wounded, those who have been wounded in this war. It was also packed with people who have been displaced, who were seeking shelter there. And we are seeing images of a massive civilian toll. The Gaza Health Ministry says hundreds of individuals. The exact death toll has also not been independently verified. Let's take a look at video that has been verified by news agencies of what this blast looked like at the hospital. Take a look.
Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Sfendisi. Ya Rabbi. Ya Rabbi.
So the images there, quite stunning, and the videos that have come out afterwards, including a press conference that was given at the hospital by some of the doctors and staff there, amid the wounded and the dead, are just beyond words in terms of the horror here. So the reports from the Palestinian side, obviously Gaza has been under severe attack from Israeli bombs. They, of course, are indicating this was an Israeli bomb, that this hospital had been told to evacuate among other hospitals as well, and that they had been directly targeted by an Israeli attack. On Israel's side, they're saying, no, this was a failed rocket attempted to be launched by Islamic Jihad that broke into pieces, fell on this hospital, and it is actually the Palestinians and Islamic Jihad's fault that this occurred. Let me show you a few things here. So first of all, the initial IDF response, which is part of what called into question their side of the story, the Israeli Defense Forces, they initially posted what they claimed was a video. Put this up on the screen that on the one side, you see this video that they posted. They said from the analysis of the operational systems of the IDF, an enemy rocket barrage was carried out towards Israel, which passed through the vicinity of the hospital when it was hit. According to intelligence information from several sources we have, the Islamic Jihad terrorist organization is responsible for the failed shooting that hit the hospital. Well, they got called out for sharing a video that had timestamps that did not correspond to when this explosion occurred. So they had to repost this tweet minus the video, which of course, fueled a lot of skepticism of their account. Also the fact that they've been caught lying about some of these things in the past. MSNBC reporting on all of this and trying to parse through what is very difficult to figure out, fog of war type of situation. I thought they did a good job of expressing why they would have skepticism of the Israeli account. Let's take a listen to that.
This is an absolutely classic fog of war situation, and we should be really clear. NBC News is not able to get into Gaza right now. The Israeli border is sealed. The Egyptian border is sealed. Our teams are not able to get there and to verify this directly. We should also say that the Israeli military at this point is not providing any evidence to back up its claims that this was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. They are citing intelligence that they have not yet made public. We should also say that this kind of death toll is not what you normally associate with Palestinian rockets. These rockets are dangerous, they are deadly. They do not tend to kill hundreds of people in a single strike.
So he's referring there to the fact that the rockets, both from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, are mostly scrapped together, actually from remnants of Israeli rockets, missiles. They do damage, they kill, but they don't typically have carnage in the hundreds of people. So that's kind of the Palestinian side. Of course, they say, of course, it was Israel. We've been under bombardment. They've warned hospitals to evacuate. This amount of carnage is inconsistent with anything that Hamas or Islamic Jihad could do. Okay, that's the Palestinian side. On the Israeli side, that MSNBC reporter at the time, he says Israel hasn't offered any evidence to support their story that it was an Islamic Jihad rocket, failed rocket attempt, piece of which broke off and hit this hospital. Since then, they have provided what they claim to be evidence, both visual drone footage that they say shows an impact that is inconsistent with what their JDAM missiles would create, the level of crater that those missiles would create. That's one piece. The other thing that they have shared is what they claim is a conversation between Hamas militants that are assigning blame to Islamic Jihad. So, Emily, one thing that we know is really clear is the response throughout the region has been one of absolute fury, chaos, anger. We can put this up on the screen. This is some images yesterday from Ramallah, where you have clashes between Palestinians and between police there. There have been protests throughout the region, large-scale protests throughout the region. You have had protests in front of both Israeli and American embassies in parts of the region. And you already have, as I mentioned, Biden's trip really, sort of sent into chaos here as a result of what occurred at this hospital. He had originally planned to meet with a variety of leaders, Arab leaders in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan, as part of this trip. That trip has been canceled, that meeting, that summit between him and those four Arab leaders, including Egypt, Palestinian Authority, and Jordan. That has been canceled out of anger at this explosion. So let me go ahead, based on all of that, Emily, and get you in here for your initial reaction.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, it looks like the death toll is in the hundreds. The Gaza Health Ministry is saying that more than 500 people were killed. American media is saying likely hundreds were killed. It's impossible to have a clear number right now, but the bottom line is you can see in footage from the hospital the carnage. You can see the children. You can see the suffering. And this is happening as humanitarian groups, as the United States and Israel are encouraging people to leave Gaza. And when people are congregating at a hospital, thinking that it's one of the safer places they could be because, it's a hospital less likely to be hit. Even Israel, and there's conflicting information on this. It's another kind of interesting point here. Israel maintains that Hamas stores munitions under hospitals, that Hamas stores munitions in areas that are residential, in areas that are really blending the civilian population with the military population. Israel also said yesterday, though, we don't bomb hospitals. We haven't bombed hospitals. And so people then reasonably were congregating at the hospital. So conflicting information even in that argument or even within that point. But people thought that, in the absence of a clear passing through Rafah, for example, they could, maybe the safest place they would be is at a hospital. The hospital was bombed, and now they're still trying, the United States and Israel are still encouraging people to leave Gaza. And so just imagine you're one of those people right now with children, and you're thinking, what do I do? Hamas is telling you to stay. Hamas is telling you to stay in your home. They're saying things like, we have a couple of options. You can fight, or you can die in your home as a martyr. So this is the information you're getting from Hamas. You just want your family to be safe. You just want your children to be safe. People who were gathering at a hospital were then caught up in this horrific carnage of the strike, And nobody has any idea. Nobody has any clear information as to what happened. So my big takeaway right now, Krystal, is basically that I'm thinking of the evacuation efforts, the humanitarian efforts. That's really scary because nobody has any incentive, clear incentive, when they don't know if they're going to be hit in safer areas. They don't know, what could come next, even at a hospital.
Well, the problem is there are no safe areas. Even after Israel told more than 1 million people to evacuate Gaza, northern Gaza and Gaza City, which is a virtual impossibility. I mean, many people don't have cars; they have nowhere to go. It's not like southern Gaza has been safe. It has also been bombed. People have also been dying there. They just hit Rafah crossing once again. So, if you're a Palestinian in Gaza right now, Israel has hit mosques, schools, marketplaces, leveled apartment buildings, leveled private homes in just this bombing campaign. And they may say, oh, we don't target hospitals, but putting this hospital aside, we know in the past they have. And so to claim that they don't ever hit medical facilities, and even in this engagement, they've also hit medical facilities, is ahistorical. I mean, again, there are no journalists on the ground to independently verify what happened. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind that Hamas lies and Israel lies. And I'll give you an example, for those who aren't aware of a recent case in which the Israeli government and the IDF in particular were caught completely fabricating a story. Something we covered here on Breaking Points in the shooting death of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was actually an American citizen and a journalist who was covering what was happening in parts of Palestine. And the IDF originally said, oh, she was caught in the crossfire. And it was actually Palestinian militants who killed her. And they even shared a video that they purported to argue proved their case. And it was only months later that they were forced, after a lot of journalistic investigation, to admit that it was actually IDF bullets that killed Shireen. So that's why, just for me, personally, based on their track record, there is basically no evidence that they could offer that I would be convinced by. I also am not going to be convinced by anything that Hamas or Islamic Jihad is saying on the ground either. The reason I think it is more likely that it was likely an Israeli strike is, I'm fairly persuaded by the fact that Hamas and Islamic Jihad rockets, there is no track record of them inflicting this level of damage anywhere. Not in Gaza, not, when they're targeting Israelis on the Israeli side of the border. So when you add that to the fact that you initially have the IDF putting out a tweet that they had to retract and take back because the evidence was not accurate, and you just look at the fact that Gaza is obviously being bombed daily by many Israeli bombs. That seems to me the most likely case. But in some ways, Emily, we were talking a little bit about this, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you have two sides that are not going to be convinced of whatever evidence is offered by the other. The Arab world has already erupted. Biden's, travel to the region already completely upended. You're going to have Israelis thinking one thing, you're going to have Palestinians thinking another thing, you're going to have Americans thinking different things. So that's where things stand. I think the one thing that we can say is there is an awful, horrific, unimaginable amount of carnage and chaos that is resulting from this war, which is, just there are no words to describe how awful it is what is happening on the ground there.
It's such an enormous amount of suffering in such a small amount of time. And I think that's probably the bleakest part, Krystal, is that there's no end in sight. And the final point I want to make before we move on is just about Twitter punditry or Twitter analysis, because there are some people, I mean, you wouldn't even know if they're doing punditry or analysis. And it does remind me of the horrific I-24 report that turned out to be imprecise last week. Breaking Points covered it, Counterpoints covered it, about the alleged 40 beheaded babies. And then Twitter devolves into this spiral of trying to figure out how many babies, whether there were any babies, and it becomes, in and of itself, this sort of rhetorical proxy war over, media coverage. And once again, we had that happening yesterday. And it is, I mean, first of all, for Israel to be involved in that, I thought was just to be putting out videos that you then have to retract. They had a spokesman saying things that were, completely contrary to where they ended up going down.
Yeah.
Again, the MSNBC clip was right. Fog of war, understandable. All of that is understandable. But for the government actually to be involved in that, I thought was really unfortunate and should be a lesson, because this is such a powder keg. When you have everyone analyzing back and forth on Twitter, you don't know if they're professional analysts, even though they are professional analysts. I saw some people who definitely are experts in this question of rockets and this question of what that might look like, even geolocators. They're still doing it from thousands of miles away and trying to piece together this puzzle without, Krystal, again, as you mentioned, any journalists on the ground with any independent media footage or, independent media footage that people feel comfortable with, that we can compare independent media footage to other independent media footage or reports, all of that stuff. There's nobody on the ground. And so you have people thousands of miles away spouting off on Twitter, sometimes helpfully, but you really have no idea what their credentials and expertise are. And all of this is a global powder keg. Even the sort of social media conversation led people to swamping embassies. And so social media can push people could push certain things over the edge. And we saw a little bit of that with the Nord Stream pipeline too. These are really scary times. And I think we've been lucky so far that we haven't seen sort of a false or confusing social media narrative spill over into serious violence.
I think that's a really important point. I will say Elon's stewardship of Twitter has not helped, because you have all these accounts now with check marks that you have no idea if this is a credible source, if it's not a credible source. People are giving themselves names like, definitive Israeli news outlet, and it's just some random person who's, propagandist who's saying whatever they want. So it is very, very, very difficult to sift through and understand what is happening when, especially in Gaza, when you do not have independent journalists who are able to get in and verify anything that is going on there. And I think that's a perfect segue into the president's visit there. He's already given a joint press conference with Netanyahu. Obviously, the specter of an American president in Israel right after this horrific hospital bombing, at a time also when even, if you accept the Israeli side of what happened there, you have, all of Gaza under complete siege. You have a complete humanitarian crisis. The whole area is running out of water. There are reports of hospital workers having to drink IV fluids out of bags. There are reports of people there who are having to drink seawater, which obviously is going to make you very sick. You cannot do that. The other hospitals in the area, the main hospital is running out of electricity. The whole all of Gaza has had their electricity shut down. They have one power plant. It long ago ran out of fuel. These hospitals are operating on generators. Those are running out of fuel now as well. So the situation is as dire from a humanitarian perspective as it could possibly be, as Biden is there standing next to Netanyahu. And to give you a sense of why I say this moment is so fraught and so dangerous and so consequential, listen to how Prime Minister Netanyahu is talking about these events and how he sees them as a sort of existential, civilizational battle. Take a listen.
Hamas are the new Nazis. Hamas is ISIS, in some instances worse than ISIS. And just as the world united to defeat the Nazis, just as the world united to defeat ISIS, the world has to stand united behind Israel to defeat Hamas. This is part of an axis of evil of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. Their open goal, is to eradicate the state of Israel. The open goal of Hamas is to kill as many Jews as they could, and the only difference is they would have killed every last one of us, murdered every last one of us, if they could. They just don't have the capacity, but they murdered an extraordinary 1,300 civilians, which in American terms is like many, many, many 9/11s. So obviously we must take action to defeat Hamas and to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But this is not only our battle, it is our common battle, the battle of civilization against barbarism. And if it's not stopped here, this savagery will reach you very soon and reach the entire world.
I find those words chilling because he's mixing together World War II analogies, 9/11, war on terror analogies, Iraq war, axis of evil, saying this is our common fight, this is existential, it's a civilizational struggle. Those are words that could help to fuel a broader conflagration. And obviously the region right now, an absolute powder keg, Emily.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.